Prototype Omnistone is probably the most unique rune Riot has ever made, allowing a player to have unlimited access to nearly every keystone in the game. As such, it's really difficult to get a hold of, and most players tend to steer clear of it as a result. I mean, hell, the wiki page to it is this long, and there's a strategy page that's just as long, if not longer. Well, keystone enthusiasts, my name is Domasis, and today we'll be demystifying Prototype Omnistone, the ultimate choice for any off-meta playstyle. Prototype Omnistone is a keystone that allows players to periodically get a single use of nearly any keystone in the game, on a 9 to 7 second cooldown if you're range, and a 5 to 3 second cooldown for melee champions. You can roll any of Press the Attack, Lethal Tempo, Conqueror, Fleet Footwork, Grasp of the Undying, Aftershock, Arcane Comet, Summon Airy, Phase Rush, Electrocute, Dark Harvest, Hail of Blades, Predator, and Glacial Augment. Your first keystone is going to last for 3 minutes if you don't use it, and every other keystone after that lasts for 40 seconds. But no matter what, so long as you're in combat, your keystone will not time out on you. Well, it's all fine and dandy, but how does it work in game? Well, Prototype Omnistone uses a table of values to determine which keystone to grant you, called Smart Selection. Smart Selection modifies the likelihood of rolling any keystone based on the given situation and a few other criteria. Smart Selection prohibits players from rolling Conqueror or Press the Attack as their first keystone at level 1. You can, however, roll it as your second keystone onwards. You can't also roll Aftershock if you don't have a basic spell with hard CC. So for champions like Malphite, who only have hard CC on their ultimate, they actually can't roll Aftershock at all. Likewise, you can't roll Predator if you don't have boots. Unless you have magical footwear. If you have magical footwear, you can actually unintentionally roll Predator without having the boots in your inventory at all, but this can only happen once. Beyond that, Omnistone's Smart Selection modifies the likelihood of rolling the following keystones if you meet their criteria. To roll Conqueror more often, you and all of your nearby enemies all have to have a high current health, further boosted if you're melee. This means that you're most likely to roll Conqueror at the start of team fights. To roll Summon Airy more often, you're going to need to build some heal and shield power, as well as be nearby any low HP allies. This includes the heal and shield power from Revitalize, so unless you absolutely have to take it, I would try to avoid running Revitalize. Dark Harvest is boosted specifically when an enemy is below 50% HP, and every stack of Dark Harvest empowers all of your subsequent keystones. We'll touch more on that in a second. Hail of Blades is boosted whenever an enemy is below 50% HP, further boosted when you're building AD or building attack speed. Predator is boosted when you're out of combat and out of range of nearby enemies, and the chance is reduced if you're in combat with nearby enemies. This means that champions with long-range ults can actually get a boosted chance of rolling Predator if they cast their ults from far enough away. They can also cast Predator during the travel or channel time to boost the damage that it does before it strikes the enemy. To roll Fleet Footwork more often, you're going to want to be below level 9 and low on HP, again below 50%. And then that can help you keep yourself topped off in certain situations. When you want to roll Glacial Augment, you're going to want to buy an item that has an active effect that slows. And that item needs to be off cooldown, so anything like Everfrost, Stridebreaker, or Turbo Chem Tank can help boost the likelihood of rolling Glacial Augment. Now, before we go any further into who should be taking Omnistone, or why you would want to take Omnistone, we need to go back and talk about Dark Harvest. For every stack of Dark Harvest that you get, you empower all of your keystones. For example, Conqueror gains more adaptive force per stack of Dark Harvest. Fleet Footwork gains more healing and more movement speed, both against champions and minions. Lethal Tempo and Hail of Blades both gain bonus attack speed per stack. Press the Attack, Electrocute, Predator, and Arcane Comet all gain more bonus flat damage per stack. Phase Rush gains more movement speed and more slow resistance per stack, and it's actually the only way to become slow immune. Aftershock and Grasp of the Undying are the two keystones that scale the hardest with Dark Harvest though. For every stack of Dark Harvest, Aftershock gains more resistances as well as more magic damage, meaning that you become tankier for every stack of Dark Harvest whenever you proc Aftershock. Grasp of the Undying, on the other hand, gives more healing and damage per empowered auto attack, and it permanently increases all of the maximum health gained from Omnistone granted grasp effects by 5%. Now, going on to Glacial Augment, for every stack of Dark Harvest that you have, Glacial Augment's slow potency increases, and this affects both the auto attack and the slow field, meaning it is possible to both reach a 100% slow on the slow field, but actually exceed it, meaning that you can actually cancel out certain movement speed bonuses. And so, with the addition of this Dark Harvest system, as well as the Smart Selection system, you can actually alter your build as you see fit and plan ahead as to what kind of playstyle you'll be wanting to play. And this is something you can actually figure out even in the draft phase. Do you realize that you need to play around utility, bolstering your engages with Glacial Augment rolls? Well, maybe you should pick up an item like Turbo Chemchink, Stridebreaker, or Everfrost. What if you're a heavy AD bruiser who relies on their passive to help them in fights like Aatrox or Darius? Purchasing early AD items like Iron Spike Whip can actually lead you to rolling Hail of Blades more frequently, which could be the difference between narrowly killing your lane opponent or dying because your next auto attack was just too slow. Okay, that's cool, but why would anybody want to take Omnistone? Well, generally, there exist situations in draft where your standard keystone choices are just flat out suboptimal. For example, as a top laner, it's generally disadvantageous to take Grasp of the Undying or Conqueror into a matchup like Quinn, as her ability to disengage and cancel your auto attacks makes it difficult to even maximize the value of those keystones, much less even use them. As such, taking Omnistone can allow you to cycle through runes that can help you get through the laning phase, while still having access to runes like Conqueror and Grasp in later team fights where they may actually provide more value. A prime example of this was seen last year at Worlds 2020, where Bin played both Omnistone Camille and Omnistone Jax, both into matchups where their standard keystones would have been suboptimal. When you're playing Jax, attempting to fully stack Conqueror against a Kennen is already very difficult as is. Doesn't matter what elo you're in. And this is only amplified by the caliber of play that's evident on the world stage. These are some of the best top laners in the world.
And it seems to me that he feels that there's no real value of taking something like a Conqueror because he won't be able to fully stack it up, perhaps against a Kennen, or perhaps he doesn't feel that the Hail of Blades doesn't offer that value, so he's like, why not just take a little bit of everything into a matchup where it feels like that there is no solid, strong answer to it. So,
as such, taking Omnistone allowed Bin to take trades in the laning phase that would normally just be flat out bad and could even result in a kill in certain situations. So then, who should take Omnistone? Generally, you have to meet a few criteria. First, you have to have some sort of interaction with auto attacks, and you can't be punished or disadvantaged by auto attacking your targets. This means that champions like Karthus and Anivia, who lose DPS by auto attacking frequently, should not take Omnistone because they'd be wasting time and keystones by auto attacking. This also means that champions like Azir, who actually can't proc on-hit effects with his soldiers, also should not be taking Omnistone, because he's disadvantaged in losing DPS by choosing to auto-attack with his regular auto-attacks versus autoing with his soldiers. On the other hand, though, this means that champions that you wouldn't normally associate with frequently auto-attacking, like Aatrox, actually have some incentive to take Omnistone, as his passive rewards players for weaving in auto attacks into his combos. The next thing you need is you have to either have hard CC that's easy to land and not crucial to your survival, or you need to completely not have CC at all. So, champions like Nautilus, Leona, Set, Bard, Aatrox, Riven, Skarner, and Vi are all excellent for this, as they either have tremendous sticking power with their innate CC, or their CC is relatively easy to land. This also means, though, that champions like Vayne, who use their CC purely as a means to stay alive in teamfights and in the laning phase, should probably avoid taking Omnistone, because wasting her E to proc Aftershock is a complete and utter waste of the spell. Champions who lack CC, however, can't roll Aftershock at all, and thus don't actually have to be worried about being stuck with a dead Keystone. The last thing you need to be able to do is pretty much be able to dispense every Keystone. Mind you, you don't have to get maximum value out of every Keystone. You just have to at least be able to get rid of the Keystones you don't want in order to pull the Keystones you do want. This is a pretty tall order for some champions, which is why Omnistone is not a universally good pick. For example, champions like Sylas and Trundle would actually have to physically alter their builds to make use of Keystones like Press the Attack or Arcane Comet, as Sylas can't proc Press the Attack, and Trundle has to use his ultimate to proc Arcane Comet otherwise. And like I stated before, just because you can roll any Keystone doesn't mean Omnistone is the right choice for that champion. Sure, Karthus and Anivia can auto-attack, but they generally don't want to, because as I mentioned before, they lose DPS by choosing to auto-attack instead of using their abilities. So, to help paint a picture of some of the best users of Omnistone, I've put together a very small list. Up in the top lane, we have champions like Aatrox, Mordekaiser, Jax, and Camille. These champions all have reliance on auto attacks, they can all quickly dispense of any of the available keystones, and have flexible build paths that allow them to pivot into different playstyles to suit the current game state. In the jungle, we have picks like Kindred, Echo, and Skarner. These champions either use hit and run tactics or, in the case of Skarner, engage directly on their opponents, allowing them to dispense keystones, make engages, find flanks, and make plays that they otherwise wouldn't be able to when they're tied down to just one keystone. Up in the mid lane, we have Twisted Fate, Yone, and Yasuo as very strong users of Omnistone. Twisted Fate can make pretty good use of every keystone in the game, and generally really likes the Inspiration Tree's runes. Omnistone allows him to play very flexibly, allowing him to really keep the enemy on their toes. Likewise, the two Crit brothers in Yasuo and Yone have very unique interactions with Omnistone, with Hail of Blades and Lethal Tempo both reducing the cooldowns of their Q in the early game, allowing them to quickly burst their opponents with sudden Q3 casts. Likewise, once they have some crit chance, rolling either of those two keystones allows them to potentially crit repeatedly, winning you fights that you wouldn't otherwise win. Down in the bot lane, we have picks like Senna, Caitlyn, and Varus. These champions have very strong early games due to higher base damages and inherent range advantages, and have a myriad of keystone options that they can use to take control of the early laning phase. The longer the game goes on, the less relevant keystones like Fleet Footwork become, and thus, Omnistone gives these champions other keystones that may prove more useful in teamfight scenarios. For supports, we have Bard, Leona, Nautilus, and Rakan as fantastic users of prototype Omnistone. These champions either have tremendous amounts of crowd control, such as Leona or Nautilus, which makes it extremely easy to proc whatever keystone they wish, or, in the case of Rakan, he's slippery and mobile enough that he can get in, proc a keystone, and get out before the enemy has time to really trade back onto him. This adds untold amounts of kill pressure in the early game, while still giving all of these supports runes like Aftershock, Glacial Augment, and Predator, which can make them teamfight menaces. And there you have it. I really hope you guys enjoyed this deep dive into Prototype Omnistone. Episode 2 of League Concepts is already in the making, and if you like this series, please let me know what you want to see next. Thanks for watching.
See the weapon I have become!